Hi, welcome to GE6, the Contemporary World and the Global Demography and Citizenship. Well, according to National Geographic Society 2022, demography is the statistical study of human population. Demographers use census data, surveys, and statistical models to analyze the size, movement, and structures of populations. Early demographic studies were often carried out by the insurance agents to determine life insurance's rates. In other accounts, we have different kinds of meaning of demography. So let's start from dictionary entries, the study of statistics that shows how human populations are changing over time, such as birth, death, income, or the prevalence of disease, according to Oxford. The statistical analysis of human populations, particularly in relationship to size, density, dispersion, and vital statistics, according to Webster Dictionary. According to Demographic Dictionary, the quantitative components of a population's general characteristics are taken into considerations in the scientific study of demography, which focuses on the size, structure, and development of human populations. Now let's move on to experts in demography. We have three experts. We have Peter MacDonald, Jacques Vallin, and Emily Grundy, three illustrious IUSSP members who have served as honorary president and previous secretaries general. Each offer the following definitions. So according to Peter MacDonald, to put it simply, demography is the scientific study of human populations. According to Emily Grundy, the scientific study of population is known as demography, understanding population's dynamics or how population fluctuate as a result of the interaction between fertility, mortality, and migration. It is important to study the numbering of people. This knowledge is a requirement for forecasting future population growth and structure, which is necessary for much commercial and government planning. According to Jacques Vallin, the statistic analysis of human population, including their dynamics and structure, as well as the causes and effects of population change. This is very iconic to pageant fans because I stand here not as one, but as 104 million Filipinos.
Because I stand here not as one, but as 104 million Filipinos.
So to formally start with our proper discussion, so we must address global demography and citizenship in this conversation. So our learning objectives are listed here, so let's get started. First is we must determine the characteristics of global city and examine the role that cities play in advancing globalization. Describe the demographic transition theory and how it influenced population globally. Analyze the political, economic, cultural, and social aspects, people's movement around the world, and demonstrate first-hand understanding the OFW's experiences. The global demography is the first subject. Demography essentially studies human population statistically. Demography studies how population changes over time and space in terms of size, composition, and movement. It makes us use of techniques from various disciplines, including anthropology, economics, and sociology. Governments and commercial companies can analyze the forecast population-related social, cultural, and economic developments by using demography. Basic demographic studies, including census, were carried out as far back as 6,000 years ago in the ancient world. However, the first demographers as we know them today, such as John Grant from the United Kingdom, emerged in the 60th century. The majority of the first statistical research focused on mortality, like how many people died and what age. Grant calculated how many men and women were of reproductive age and military age by looking at baptismal and burial data. One of the earliest statistical analysis of a region's population can be found in his paper, Early insurance agents frequently conducted demographic surveys to calculate life insurance's prices. Government census and birth and death registers are the main sources of data used by demographers. However, depending on how accurate official records are, these sources might be wrong. Surveying smaller populations within a population is another indirect method used by demographers to collect data. The inferences about the entire population are then drawn from the analysis of these samples using statistical models. This is according to Brown 2022. So the big three of demography is the birth, death, and migration are what determined whether populations are stable or changing. So, I will show you a video presentation that will briefly explain the demography and the population.
Now let's get started. Demographic change concerns everyone. No matter what age, gender, or where he or she comes from. How a society is shaped and what effects it has on the future are big questions within demographic work. Demographic change can mean many things, from aging in society to you starting a family. But let's look at the bigger picture. Did you know that just by being alive means that you are a part of society? In order to understand how you fit into this societal equation, it is important to know what that means for you personally and globally. So, to have a great impact, it starts with being aware of your surroundings. Ultimately, you are the ones who affect demography now and in the future.
That's nice to know, but why should I be interested in my role and participation in society?
Well, it's because the young population is most affected from changes in the society. It's your future we're talking about. But demography is not just about the bigger picture. It has many parts to it. And to get in touch with these topics, you can now download the app, A Life Journey. The app can be downloaded for free from the App Store for use on your iPhone or iPad. It's easy to use and understand so that the young and old can learn together.
How do populations work? In biology, a population is all the organisms of the same group or species which live in a particular geographical area and have the capability of interbreeding. So what causes a population to increase? Two things that cause a population to increase are birth rates and immigration. With every birth inside of the particular species, populations grow and increase in size. Immigration also affects the growth of the population by adding to the existing size. But what causes a population to decrease? Death rates and emigration are two components that play a role in lowering growth rates. Death rates are the rate at which the individuals in a population die. If it is larger than the birth rate, then the population will decrease. Emigration can also cause a population to decrease, because it means that individuals are leaving or moving away from their home population. Species grow at different speeds. So how do we categorize the speed that these populations increase and decrease at? One categorized speed is exponential growth. Exponential growth is the increase of a population that grows more and more rapidly. This occurs when the needed resources of the population becomes unlimited. Another speed is logistic growth. In contrast to exponential growth, logistic growth is the decrease of a population. Populations are measured in geographic ranges. A geographic range is the place that a population lives in. The species inhabiting a geographic range can spread throughout them in different densities. These densities are categorized into three different types. The first is random, where the population is spaced across a geographic range unevenly. The second is uniform, where the population is spaced across a geographic range evenly. And the third is clumped, where several individuals of a population are packed closely together. One thing that all geographic ranges have in common is carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is the number of individuals of a species that an environment can support. Carrying capacity is determined by limiting factors. The limiting factors keep the population from increasing. There are two types of limiting factors. The first is density-dependent limiting factors, which are factors that operate more strongly when population densities are high. Examples of this are stress from overcrowding, parasitism, and disease. And for animals, density-dependent limiting factors can unbalance the predator-prey relationship as well. The second is density-independent limiting factors. Density-independent limiting factors are limiting factors that can affect any population, regardless of its size and density. Examples of density-independent limiting factors include natural disasters, such as floods, famine, tornadoes, hurricanes, droughts. If a natural disaster is drastic enough, it can wipe out entire geographic ranges and can cause entire species extinctions. Extinction can also occur if a carrying capacity drops low enough. So how do we compare population growth over time? Those who are specifically interested in human population growth go into the science of demography. Demography takes in information about populations, such as limiting factors and carrying capacities, and use it to determine the cause of demographic shifts and to predict future populations. These demographers have studied the growth patterns of the populations of the US and South America and have come up with a hypothesis to explain these countries' shifts in population size. They call it demographic transition. There are 5 stages in the demographic transition hypothesis. The first is a stable population with a slow increase. The second stage is a very rapid increase. The third stage is a slowing increase. Fourthly, the population decreases and then stabilizes. For the fifth stage, the population either remains stable or starts to decline slowly. But what about the rest of the world? Are they a part of demographic transition? The answer is no. India, China, and the sub-Saharan Africa all have rapidly growing populations. By studying age structures, demographers can predict the future populations of these countries. They use age structure diagrams that use gender and age to determine how large of a population it will become in the future. They use the ratio of children to adults. If there are more children than adults, then the population will increase in the future. And if there are less children in that population than adults, then it will decrease in the future. But of course, not everything can be predicted. Natural disasters are bound to happen, but even though demography can't show us everything about the future, it can help us learn from the past. And just by watching this presentation, you have taken your first step into a larger world. A world of populations.
According to the movie, migration and death are the 2 causes that might cause population to decline, while birth and migration are the 2 reasons that can cause population to expand. Speaking on migration, Anthony, Kathleen, and Isa will report the following topic, which is all about the global migration.
Global migration is a circumstance in which individuals or a group of individuals move abroad to reside, but more commonly to work. The majority of global migration occurs from underdeveloped to developed nations. Geographically speaking, global migration is the movement of people across a border that has been predefined in the quest of a new permanent or semi-permanent residence. Global migration also goes by the term international migration. When people cross state borders and stay in a host state for a set amount of time, this type of migration occurs. It is also great to note that people travel the globe either voluntarily or involuntarily. In the latter, people might be forced to migrate as a result of war or natural disaster, and in this scenario, the migration was not of their own free will. With this in mind, under the international law, the right and freedom to mobility is protected.
Therefore, one drawback of migration is that it immediately decreases the supply of labor, especially skilled labor. On the other hand, there are certain benefits of migration, such as repeat migration and through return migration. Therefore, people migrate for a variety of reasons, which is why they migrate. These factors might be categorized as environmental, social, political, and economic migration.
Moving for economic reasons, such as seeking employment or pursuing a certain career path. Moving somewhere for a better quality of life or to be nearer to family or friends is known as social migration, on the other hand. Finally, there is environmental migration, which is caused by natural disasters like flooding. Political migration is when people move to avoid political persecution or war. So let's watch this video to learn more about migration and how it affects every nation.
Human mobility can have wide-ranging impacts both on the countries where migrants come from and the countries where migrants go. While a person or group's movements can be between towns or cities in the same country, researchers and policymakers alike are often interested in what happens when people migrate internationally or across an international country border. In this video, we will specifically examine the effects of international migration in the destination or host countries. Migration effects are observed at different levels of society and under a variety of circumstances. While this video is not meant to be a complete list of every effect host countries or locations will experience, it will summarize some of the most commonly discussed and researched outcomes. In general, there are effects that individual migrants or groups of migrants experience themselves in the destination country. There are also effects of migration on the communities where migrants live. And finally, there are macro-level effects felt at the country or regional level. The effects we will discuss here are of course the result of migration. Certain mechanisms or characteristics, however, have a more direct role in shaping these host country effects. For example, many of the innovation and labor market effects destination countries experience are caused by an increased presence of job-seeking immigrants. Important migrant characteristics that can affect outcomes are things like language abilities, levels of education, skills and qualifications, transnational ties to the origin, place, or community, and gender. Another important area to acknowledge relates to skills transfers. Migrants in host locations can impact parts of the economy, like through innovation, by transferring their knowledge, ideas, and even cultural values to the native population and thereby expanding the ways problems are approached and solved, or by creating new technologies. The effects migrants individually experience in host locations are often a result of specific characteristics. Firstly, a migrant's own skill set, educational qualifications, regularity of their immigration status, their country of origin, and aspirations play an important role in determining the type of employment, working conditions, and even social cohesion experienced in the destination. The approach a host society takes towards immigrants is also important, whether there is a welcoming culture or not. Additionally, immigrants whose qualifications are highly regarded by host countries may find more favorable employment conditions than those whose backgrounds are not as highly valued. If all goes well for migrants, they can experience many positive effects in a host country, like higher wages, better living conditions, safer environments, more rewarding jobs, and increased access to education and healthcare. On the other hand, migrants can face negative consequences. This is especially likely when migrants are either classified as unskilled or don't have the right permissions to stay and work in the country of destination. In these cases, it is likely for migrants to only find employment characterized by what we call the 4D jobs. These are dangerous, dirty, demeaning, and dull jobs. In addition to possible exploitation, migrants can face a decreased standard of living in the host society if they're under intense pressure to send cash remittances back to their place of origin, since this will decrease the funds available for them to live off of in the destination country. Despite these possible negative effects, there is research identifying some advantages migrants have when finding employment. This is because of the specific transferable knowledge migrants bring to host societies that gives them a comparative advantage over the native populations in certain sectors. Take food preparation and restaurant ownership. Immigrants have knowledge of the cultural dishes found in their places of origin, so they can specialize in making their native cuisine in the host society, since the local population would have less knowledge of how to prepare these foods. While immigrants can see positive benefits from such entrepreneurial activities, research has shown that this is less desired as an alternative to typical wage employment. Now let's broaden our scope to look at the effects immigrants can have on their immediate surroundings. Here, we will focus on effects at work and school. In the workplace, there is a large collection of research on migrants' effects on innovation. While innovation is a broad term describing how individuals, teams, and societies develop new ideas, devices, or methods to solve problems, we commonly see it measured as the number of patents a company files. Immigrants can transfer their knowledge and use their outside perspective to challenge their local counterparts on how to think differently than how they would typically in a group of like-minded natives. In fact, studies in the United States show that skilled migrants on average have higher patenting rates compared to the native population. Similar mechanisms, including positive competition, have been shown to increase educational learning and performance in more diverse educational settings. Think of how universities often promote the international character of their classroom because they understand the value of students learning from each other who have different backgrounds. Now let's turn our attention to country-level effects like wages and labor market indicators. A common concern is that extra labor supply that immigration generates will drive wages down since there may be more people competing for the same jobs. On one hand, immigrants themselves commonly face wage penalties, but the mechanisms causing this is less about inflows of job seekers and more about host country attitudes towards foreign qualifications. Foreign-earned qualifications are often approached with skepticism by host country employers, who then often offer lower wages to employees who completed their training abroad. On the other hand, the idea that immigrants' presence drives down wages for host country populations has been disputed in several academic studies. Much of this research simply finds a net zero effect on wages, so neither positive nor negative. In addition, researchers routinely find that immigration offers complementary skills that can be applied side by side with the abilities of the native population. This basically results in specialization. Native-born workers are more likely to have communication-intensive positions that require high fluency in the host country's language, while immigrant workers tend to work in more research and development-intensive jobs that emphasize specific skills over communication. It often also results in immigrants working in the least skilled jobs where local populations do not want to work. Think about domestic work and agricultural work. Finally, a unique group of migrants that has been particularly studied in host countries are refugees. Since this population has been forced to flee from their origin due to a well-founded fear of persecution, the circumstances inciting their movement are certainly unique. In terms of the labor market, hosting refugees has been associated with increased likelihood of wage employment and a decrease in informality among highly skilled local workers. On the other hand, studies have observed competition between refugees and low-skilled local workers for employment. Whether or not this drives down unskilled wages is still a debated issue. Outside of the labor market, hosting refugees can affect social cohesion. While this is dependent on location and circumstances, evidence from countries like Rwanda and those in Northern Europe has not associated refugee hosting with a serious threat to social cohesion. Now that's a brief introduction to the effects of migration in destination countries.
Global citizenship refers to the social, environmental, and economic acts of individuals and groups who are aware that every person is a citizen of the world. It is about how decisions made in one area of the world may have an impact on individuals living in another area, and about how everyone is equally valuable and shares a shared humanity. It entails having an open mind to interacting favorably with people of different ages, races, and cultures, as well as the capacity to identify and dispel misconceptions. Additionally, it concerns the equitable use and distribution of the planet's resources as well as the defense of everyone's human rights. Simply said, a global citizen is someone who knows their place in the larger world and is conscious of it. They are a global citizen. They participate actively in their community and collaborate with others to improve the peace, sustainability, and fairness of our Earth.
So tell me how one becomes a world citizen. When people decide to become global citizens, they have already taken a step in the right direction to increasing their global awareness. However, there are some things, both small and large, that you personally can do to take steps forward creating global citizenship in your own life. Here are a few examples what you have to do in order to get this kind of global education and world mindset. To become a global citizen, this is the first step to learn oneself about the world. If you are unable to travel to a certain nation or culture, you can still learn about it online through reading and communicating with others in other parts of the world about your personal experiences. Second is to inform yourself. Being a part of community entails giving and receiving, and you as a learner, you learn more about the world. You may see yourselves others' desires that you need to be amplified. Third, go out and see the world. Traveling is the best way to experience the world and gain global citizenship. And lastly, the final step is to learn how to lead. It is stated that leaders, not ideas, change the world. There is an urgent need for leaders with a wider range for experiences and better empathy. You may be able to continue more by developing your personal leadership abilities and becoming a leader who can concentrate their efforts on issues that are significant to them. Watch this video to learn more about global citizenship.
What is global citizenship? It involves the awareness that the world is connected as one, and that the individual members that make up the world are also connected as citizens of the world's humanity. Rapid globalization has brought the world closer. Exchanges between countries are more frequent, and the stories of people on the other side of the earth are now the stories of our neighbors. The world is becoming one global village. Similarly, political, economic, and social issues of the modern world are now beyond any one nation's ability to solve. To address these issues, we need to feel a sense of common responsibility and look for solutions together as global citizens. The term citizen implies a person's right to participate politically in a city or country. Combined with the term global, the person's identity is expanded beyond geographical and political boundaries. This means that a global citizen's responsibilities or rights are derived from being a member of the human race. Aristotle, the father of political science, said, "A good citizen must have the ability and wisdom to govern, moderation and prudence, and knowledge of what is right." Extending this concept to a global citizen, the global citizen is someone who possesses the wisdom and morality to govern the world righteously. The founders of the Sonak Peace Prize, Reverend Sung Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, proposed early on their vision of peace, one family under God. It is a vision that the world should live together as a family practicing God's love. How can we create such a world of peace? Let's take a moment to look at our reality. As the 20th century came to a close, people were full of expectations for a world of peaceful coexistence among global citizens. But how is the 21st century? Although national barriers are lower than ever before, the great powers' interests still take priority in international politics. Transnational capital has caused inequalities on a global level, and there are endless regional conflicts and constant threat of deadly terrorism. The expectations for the role of the nation are on the rise. We are seeing a revival of nationalism. What can we do for a world of peace? We need to raise our future generations as global citizens who can help foster humanity. In an interdependent world, education aimed at peaceful coexistence is fundamental. Through education that enables sustainable development, such as education about diverse cultures, peace, human rights, poverty, inequality, and climate change, our future generations can enhance their sense of global citizenship. The need for international cooperation and regulation is becoming more urgent. The future generations who will shape our future will have to approach solutions from a global citizen's perspective. This will be the first step toward global peace.